You're listening to Inclusive AF with Jackie Clayton and Katie Van Horn.
Hi, this is Katie Van Horn.
And this is Jackie Clayton, and welcome to the Inclusive AF podcast.
Episode 2.
2.2.
Two. Yeah, we may have recorded these multiple times. So, Jackie, I know today we want to talk about inclusion. And so I think the way to start this conversation off is to actually talk a little bit about Wells Fargo and what's going on at Wells Fargo, what has been going on at Wells Fargo, and some of the nonsense that we're hearing from them.
Absolutely. So just to start, for those of you who hadn't heard, Wells Fargo, and for our international audience, maybe some people don't realize, Wells Fargo is a bank, a community-based bank. They have $1.9 trillion in assets. They
trillion with a T.
That's with a T, trillion. They have their CEO is the highest paid at $36.4 million annually. And they're an affirmative action, equal opportunity employer. However,
sweet. All of that's so sweet to hear.
All of that is great. However, this past week, or within this month, the CEO said that he was unable to find Black talent when asked about the lack of diversity there at Wells Fargo. And also, an article just came out that identified that 7 of Black African-American women executives have left within the last 12 months. 7 high-ranking Black women have left Wells Fargo. So as if just the fact that he made that comment wasn't indicative enough of that there's obviously a problem with the culture, having that evidence just says to me, shame, horror.
Yeah, so this one, it's actually, and this is no laughing matter in any way, shape, or form, but it's actually an example that I give in some of my trainings that I do. And it's basically the whole idea of inclusion and starting with inclusion and the fact that you can go out and hire 10 amazing African-American women, Black women, and if you don't have the culture to support their growth, their development, their ability to influence all of those things, they will leave. And this is such a stark example. And, it's an unfortunate example because we want a situation where people feel like they can contribute when they come to work. We want a situation where people feel like they can do amazing work, and to have a situation where people are leaving because they feel like I'm not being heard. I can't do the work or deliver on the work that I'm being asked to do because of the lack of impact or the lack of listening, whatever you want to call it. It's just so unfortunate. And it's such a horrible situation that, so many companies are in a state where they're trying to recruit amazing talent that are from underrepresented groups. And this is just a great example of a company that did that, but then forgot that other piece of it, that is you actually have to have an environment where people can thrive.
And let's, expand on that, because so many people say, oh, diversity is being asked to the dance and inclusion is being asked to dance. And I call BS, because I'm like, okay, if you ask me to dance, but you're playing like Baroque music, I'm not dancing. I don't feel comfortable. If you're doing...
What's your problem with Baroque music?
Well, no, I love it.
Okay.
I can't dance to it. You know what I mean? Like,
solid.
If you invited me and everybody's going to do like classic ballroom dancing, even though I was asked to dance, if I do, I'll look stupid. So let's talk about inclusion for what it is. It's feeling included. So inclusion is not being asked to dance. It's being asked, do you dance? What kind of music do you like to dance to?
Right.
Is there something I can do to make you feel like dancing at this get together? That's inclusion. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. And I say that because these 7 Black female executives were invited to the dance, and they were even asked to dance. And they said, hell no, I'm not going to dance. That's what they said.
Right.
That's what they said. because
And
they didn't take it far enough to understand that just being asked to dance isn't enough.
absolutely. And so that analogy by Verna Myers, which I actually do like, because it at least it kind of gives a odd visual, but it gives a visual to folks of like what you're thinking about.
Yes.
But the last piece of that belonging piece of, you know, the words to the songs, or you like the music that's being played, or whatever that, you know, extra piece is, that belonging piece. Because you're right, you can hire the most amazing talent, but if they don't like the music, and they don't like, if the culture isn't right, and I'm not talking about culture fit, I'm talking about just the ability to actually get work done and the ability to be heard. Because I think that's what I mean, I think we've all experienced this. I have experienced this as a woman in business, where you have the right idea, you have the right, what should we do, you know, the right solution to an issue. But if you're not heard, and if you don't feel like someone's listening, then it's like, okay, why am I even talking? Why am I even here? And however they were not being heard, it's just unfortunate, because think about the talent. And I mean, the reason why some of these women were brought into the organization, one, I know for sure was brought in because of all of the stuff, the chaos that was created by the multiple accounts that Wells Fargo was creating for people, and all of these other things that were going on that were so unethical. And so I know one of the women was brought in to try and rectify that, and try and kind of make that better, and make solutions that made sense for their customers. And so for that person to now be gone, and them to lose that talent, is just, it's baffling to me why an organization would bring folks on and then not actually let them do good work.
Well, now listen to this too. I'm going to get specific, because 7 is just, you know, an estimate, but let's talk about some of these
Right.
people that actually left. Okay. So one was Beverly Anderson. She left the bank in November. She was the head of cards and retail services. She now works at Equifax, and she was appointed to the board of Expedia. Another was Yvette Clark, Regulatory Innovation Officer and former Chief Compliance Officer, will be leaving this year. T.T. Cole, Head of Operations, left for Citigroup. Bevelyn Coleman was Wells Fargo Deputy General Counsel. She left the bank. She joined First Union in 1995, according to her LinkedIn profile. The other one was Colleen Taylor, Head of Merchant Services, who left in September after working for just over a year, is now the head of U.S. Merchant Services at American Express. And two other left. One is at Citibank, and the other one is at Microsoft. So these are not, before you think, oh, they're probably just bitter or they were unqualified. These are top people leaving, giving that competitive advantage willingly to competitors, as well
Right.
as other organizations that they feel like they're going to be brought forward. And I think we're going to see that a lot as we're looking deeper at the numbers. But the thing that's the most disturbing is that the CEO believe that is truth. That's why it came from
Right.
his mouth. I don't feel
Right.
like he's a stupid person.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that leads to a great point, because to your point, he said a very stupid thing. And, you know, and I think that's something that we should share as well. I don't know if folks have heard of this yet, but there was a memo that he recently shared with his employees around the fact that Black talent wasn't within the pool, or the, you know, they didn't have the ability to source Black talent for their roles because they didn't exist. And my response to that is, you're right. You're not going to find Black talent if all you're looking at is places where white talent hangs out.
Right.
And so, you know, it's one of those things that if you're looking in the wrong places, you're not going to find the right people. You're not going to find people from groups that you want representation from. And that's something that I think every organization, you know, that whole, hey, our pipeline, you know, we have a broken pipeline, all of these commentaries that you hear from folks, especially sometimes from recruiters. And, you know, that it makes me want to, you know, get out my fists and do a little throat punching, which I shouldn't do. It's not appropriate, because it is a situation where, hey, you actually can find this talent if you try to find it. They're there, and they're absolutely excited and want to come and work for your organization. if they will be heard and if they will be able to contribute.
Hey, Katie, you know what? I have an idea.
Let's hear it.
Why doesn't he take some of that $36.9 million
His base salary.
And invest in finding diverse talent?
Wait, what? You actually have to invest in diversity? That's
He knows about invest. He's a bank. It's a bank.
okay. So he understands how money works
In theory.
And so like, actually that goes to like another point around like product development. And this is, the whole diversity topic always, it blows my mind when people are like, so, hey, we're going to start diversity initiatives, but we're not going to put any budget around it. So you can just figure it out. Right. And then the mental challenge, the heavy lifting, all of that goes to folks, usually the folks from underrepresented groups that are doing this, and the tax that they pay because of that is so heavy. And so there is that, if you actually launch a product, oddly enough, you actually have to invest in that product to make it successful.
Turns out.
Pay money to get money. Same thing applies when you are trying to launch a product, which is, hey, as an employer, we value diversity. As an employer, we've created this inclusive environment. You actually have to have money to support that work. Turns out.
Well, and the other part is, I want to make sure that we don't seem stupid. Like admittedly, there is a shortage of STEM talent in underrepresented groups. It's been a push for many years. But then when you look at that situation, here's the other way, and this is the other way when we're talking about investing so you can have these diverse populations. We're not saying, oh, have a job fair at an HBCU. Okay, we're like talking about doing more than that. Invest in your people that are there. It's one of those things, they have lots of opportunity. And this is where equity comes in. And we talk a lot about equity. I think people are very confused about what equity means. So equity means if you have somebody on your staff, right? Maybe they already have a bachelor's degree, maybe they don't have a bachelor's degree, but that's the difference between them moving over to be promoted to another level. When you have enough money in your organization, invest in the person to help them with like tuition reimbursement or pay for their education so that you can develop these people that have committed their time and energy and efforts to your organization. Get them promoted. And it's equity because it's we already know there could be situations that made it not very easy for them to go to college.
Yep. Absolutely. And so here, I 1000% support what you're saying. And I will add to that. So the approach that I always encourage organizations to think about is, yes, have those that are starting kind of from that entry level role, the new college grads. Yes, sure. Folks that you find at HBCUs or whatever other places, whatever colleges, schools, universities that you have created a relationship at where you can find that underrepresented talent. But it also is find them for the top. Yes. And so Wells Fargo, honestly, like great job to hire senior level Black women to take on roles that are extremely important. That's huge. However,
they all hate you.
They all, yeah, I was gonna say, except for when it doesn't work out because you don't actually listen to their advice. I mean, every one of those women, if you look at their, their pedigree, their background, it's amazing. And to your point, they got snatched up by these awesome organizations and they're going to do great stuff for them. But there is that piece where it's you have to be working on both fronts, the bottom and the top. And it's also that whole idea of, if you can see it, you can be it, where, if you're sitting in an entry level role and everyone that you're looking at across the leadership team is a white male, and that's not to bash on white males, but that's, if that's all you can see in the executive team and on the board, then you start to question and go, well, could I ever get there? And then you start to think maybe this isn't the organization for me. And then you start to disengage more and more and more as you see those, places of inclusion or those places of belonging disappear.
And side note to people who don't know this, who aren't in HR or the talent acquisition space, when you say stuff like that, you become a poachable organization, which means all recruiters all over town went to see if there was any underrepresented group at your organization, and they're going to keep falling off and they'll be willing to go.
Absolutely. And I think, what I've seen a lot of organizations do, and I think this is so critical, is also, and, you and I have talked about this multiple times, that showing up authentically as an employer. So in your employee branding, like, you can't be like, oh, hey, let me get stock models that are Black just to show that we have diversity, if you really don't.
But have you looked at their ads like the past week?
No.
Like, totally, they went to like blackwomen.com and just started picking people, and all of a sudden, and I was like cracking up because I'm like, there's no way this guy is sitting in your break room like all comfortable reading the newspaper, as if
Right.
nothing happened within the last month, but an announcement.
And also no one reads newspapers anymore.
Oh yeah,
It's
well,
all
there's that.
online. Sidebar.
There's that. Yeah, but I digress. Well, no, Katie digresses. I'm always just right there, straight and narrow.
And you know what? And you and I have talked about this. And I, not to incriminate any of my prior employers or clients, but we've talked about the situation where I was working with someone that had a amazing attorney working for them who happened to be a Black woman, and they had her sit in a call center and put on a headset to pretend she was a call center employee because they wanted to show diversity. Yuck. And like, it was embarrassing for the organization. I cannot even imagine what that woman felt as she was being tokenized to the nth degree. And also, FYI, you have diversity in the call center. So why would you fake it? Like, why would you do that? And so, like, there is this whole piece of showing up authentically as well, that for Wells Fargo to now be showing all these ads of like here's the Black man reading the newspaper in the break room, having a great time working at Wells Fargo. Like, yuck. That's not what we're talking about. And it's not, hey, yeah, we have actually a great organization to work for. If you want to hire people from underrepresented groups, think about the population. I would be curious. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd be curious about their customer base. Their customer base isn't all white people. And so, and this is something, we can talk about banking and banking with Black banks, all of those things. But there is this piece also of who is your customer base, and are you actually representing them, and the tools and the products and all of these things? Clearly not.
Well, here was something else that was interesting.
Did you just shrink? Come back up.
Did I shrink? Did I go somewhere?
Well, you moved down.
Hello. Hi.
Come back to us.
I had to look at something.
Sorry.
Very important.
So sorry.
But I was looking at what was interesting. They do have, according to my research, they do have, it's like 44.9% female, and then 9.7% Hispanic, Latinx, 5.5% African American. It's that's the African American Asian veteran were about average, which is not great. But I felt like that was a high population of Latinx and Hispanic populations. But the other thing that was interesting.
I'm going to interrupt you, and I apologize for interrupting you, but I would be curious to know where their call centers are. Because if their call centers are in places that are known to be cheap land and cheap rent for call centers, a lot of times you will see diversity in the population. And so it's almost without trying, you get a diverse population in your call center.
Well, it is. Well, it's Charlotte. The number one location is Charlotte, North Carolina, with over 28,000 living in Charlotte. And then the next biggest 16,000 in Minneapolis, and then San Francisco.
That's where they are based. Their corporate locations are their, yeah.
But I just, the whole thing is, and I don't know, it's not funny. I'll tell you, it's the not funniest thing of all, is when they said, oh, we're going to double our African-American leadership by 100%. They want to double it. So it'll go from 6% to 12%. And it's just like, okay.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
And like, here's the thing. I never want to tell an organization, that's not enough, because when you have organizations that are that large, to move from 6 to 12, every percentage point counts. However,
You can't close the door. The thing that's
yeah.
so funny about it, the reason that it's funny is because you're losing people. Like, you're going to have to try to hold the back door while people
Right.
are running out the front door. So
Exactly.
that's why it's like, good luck for you to put
Right.
numbers out.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate it. It's very close. It's very close when people say that percentage. But
Mm-hmm.
like, don't say the percentage. I mean, say the percentage and have a goal, right? But the
Right.
goal should be overall, not just executives, company wide. We're making a push to get underrepresented people, because I get nervous about people saying, okay, we don't have to hire anymore. Like, I actually spoke to someone that said, we don't have any diversity initiatives. I believe it was at Capital One. They were like, oh, I know that they had a really big push and they were able to reach their goals. And somebody who of insignificance was just like, oh yeah, we don't have to do that anymore. I was like, I bet you they wouldn't say that at the corporate office.
No.
But we're like, well, we made this push, and so we just have to watch our numbers that we don't slant it in the
So
other
we're done
direction.
now? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're never done, folks. Just so we're
Right.
all on the
You're
same page.
one tweet away from losing
All of it.
freaking at least most of it.
Right. And thank you for calling out the piece of the, front door, back door analogy, because it is when you have a situation where you have folks that you're recruiting and you're doing the best you can on the front end, but then you have folks running out the back door because it is or the front door, whatever your analogy.
Which one? Front door, back door?
I'm not sure.
Windows.
Yeah,
chimneys.
going out, because of the fact that they don't have an inclusive environment, don't have a space that's safe. I think that's something to just acknowledge and really be aware of, is that a lot of times in these organizations, it's, oh, we're doing all these great recruiting efforts. But when you talk about and going back to that inclusion piece, if it's not there, then it's all for naught.
So now that we don't have to keep going, even though we don't have to keep
Right.
going on about what they did. Let's talk about what they can do moving forward.
Yes.
I think that number one, and this is the part that makes you just want to scream. His apology said, oh, you must have misinterpreted it, and it was my own unconscious bias, which, like, I don't know where the PR person was. Wrong answer. If you want to fix something like this, if something happens to your organization like this, the first thing you do is you own it. You
Right.
have to fully own it and say, organizations, especially organizations that have been around as long as Wells Fargo, the systemic racism has been here since we opened,
Right.
since they went cross to find gold in the chuck wagon.
Yeah, when they were actually, riding in the wagon
Right.
with their horses and
Yes.
changing out their horses at every major stop, Wells Fargo.
Correct. While they were panning for gold.
Right.
Oregon Trail. So as they went and they were doing, this is something that you have to own. You say, the reason we don't have any is because we haven't invested enough in getting the right people to the table.
Correct.
These are the steps that we're going to do. We're meeting on Thursday. We'll have an announcement on Friday. We're going to start doing da-da-da-da-da. So that way people don't punt. And because they didn't, they just made it worse for themselves. So the first thing you do is own it. And people will give you so much more respect if you own it, because because he didn't own it, and right after he made that stupid comment, people started pulling their money. It is going to affect them in their pockets for a while.
Right. And I think that's the piece that for so many executives, I think there's either the paralyzing fear, which we talked about in the last episode, or there's I'm going to say something and maybe, and not think it through. And there is that piece of, as an employee, if you're sitting at Wells Fargo and your CEO says, hey, sorry, we don't actually have any more diversity because they don't exist, or we haven't tried hard, or we haven't tried at all. As an employee, I'm going, okay, this is probably not the organization for me. And it goes to another point, that I think are going to talk about later or in another episode around, what are organizations doing and how are they actually tracking, are we good at this or not? And, and I think there's just some great pieces here that we can kind of look at and talk about. But the main goal is, acknowledge where you are today and say, wow, we haven't done a good job of this, or wow, we aren't where we should be based on our customer base, based on what's going on in the world today, whatever it might be. And
I was
acknowledging
fully
that.
triggered.
I'm sure.
I mean, it also reminded me, and our guests will have to learn about my husband, Todd. It just reminded me of my husband saying something like, they don't have pears at the grocery store. And you're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm going to have to, obviously, I'm going to have to do this for you.
Right.
Right. And then it's like, but I don't want to have to do that.
Yeah.
This is your job.
Right.
You're the CEO.
Right.
Which, again, as you listen, you will get to know those types of stories. But I was like fully triggered by that comment.
And to your point, as a CEO going, yes, sorry, we looked for him at the supermarket, but we didn't find him. So shucks.
No pears.
Yeah.
No pears for you.
No pears for anybody. Sorry. That's, like, I think all of it is not okay. And again, as an employee sitting, in my seat or, at the bank teller position, whatever it might be, to have your CEO say that would be so, again, we talk like that erasing of who you are, or that not acknowledgement of who you are, who your population is.
That's right.
And discounting the employees you have as well. So all of that, I think, is really just, we need to think about that and think through, what does that actually mean to organizations? And to your point, let's talk a little bit about what can organizations do. Hey, you acknowledge it. You say, wow, we screwed up, or wow, we're not where we want to be. Then what?
Then we have to have a short-term and a long-term plan. Like, you have to stop the bleeding right away. Like, you need to have a genuine apology, a quotable, emailable, company-wide apology, video, like everybody go into the cafeteria and watch me talk apology.
Yes.
So then that will help stop the bleeding for a little bit. And you have to do something immediately, even if it's send out a survey right away where people can share their thoughts. But then you have to partner with your HR, and you might have to hire outside consultants that can help you, especially with a company of this size.
Right.
Like Starbucks tried to do in a really weird way when they had that. But you need to have people on staff that can directly deal with the people's complaints or concerns.
Yeah.
Have an option where you take that information.
Absolutely. And I think the piece that, and this is for any type of survey that employers send out, the piece that I think companies at times don't do a good job of is they send out that survey and they read the feedback and it's like, okay. And then they move on to the next thing, versus if you're going to ask people, then know that you actually have to do something about it. You can't just ask and then be like, cool, that was fun. Now, what are we moving to next?
Right.
You actually have to take action from that feedback. And even if it is, hey, thank you so much for that feedback, we're not going to do anything about it.
Right.
You have to acknowledge it. And it's something that I say to leaders all the time, because a lot of times they're like, oh, well, we got the feedback and we did this, but the employees aren't even understanding that we did. And you literally have to say, we heard you. Right. We heard your feedback.
Here are the results.
And here's what we did. And here's what we're doing. And here's what our plan is, in the next 3 years. And I love the idea that you just said about short and long term, like, yes, stop the bleeding. But it's also what actions are you going to take? If you get that survey, great, take some action from what you hear. Right. If you decide, oh, hey, we're going to start recruiting in places that we have not recruited before. And, there are so many great, amazing recruiting agencies that are looking at, where do you find talent that you haven't before? There are so many websites that you can now go to find Black and brown and whatever other type, whatever else you're looking for. There's so many great tools now to try and find different talent.
Yes.
It's there. You just have to actually look and try.
And you can hire those people too. That's another,
yes.
It's very important to understand there are some differences between what we were taught as recruiters and those that do the work of diversity recruiting, because you can't get somebody who's been in the seat at Wells Fargo for 25 years as a recruiter and send them out and say, do you want to work for Wells Fargo, diverse person? That's not going to work.
Right. Right.
You know, like you have to get professionals and understand, because they're going to have to answer some hard questions. So
Mhm.
you do the survey, you publish the results of the survey,
Right.
you have to say how you're going to respond to the survey,
Yes.
invite people to collaborate, and then talk about what you can do within talent acquisition to help them boost those numbers. They're going to have an education, different resources,
Mhm.
and they're going to have to do some work, because if they're not finding them, the culture has been set and they have
Yes.
not been. You have to invest in those people as well.
Amen. And invest is the key word there. In my opinion, it is you can expect someone that has never done this before to just know what they're supposed to do and flip a switch and go, oh yeah, now I can recruit for veterans or for people that are differently abled or for whatever X is that you're trying to look for. And
Right.
so I think I love organizations that do dedicated recruiters that focus on different populations, because I think that's just a great way to, start to develop relationships with those groups. But I also think you have to teach them, you have to train them, and also just the language of
Yes.
interviewing. And what I mean by that isn't like, hey, teach your hiring managers, which you also need to do, but I'm talking about as a recruiter, the recruiter has bias as well. The recruiter I had an experience where I was hiring for another HR business partner for my team, and the male recruiter came to me and said, the one candidate that we had selected, who happened to be a woman and who happened to be Indian, she keeps negotiating with me and she just won't take what I'm offering to her. And I was like, oh my God, awesome. I love that. And he
Pushback.
was like, wait, what are you
Great.
talking about? Like, why would that
Challenging.
be a good
But
thing?
yeah.
And I'm like, why would I not want someone that is like, I want someone that's going to challenge, that's going to say, that's not good enough for me, or, hey, we need to do better. Those are the people that I want on my team. Those are the people that I want beside me, that are going to challenge me as well, that are going to say, hey, Katie, you can do this better, and here's how. And so I think that training your recruiters on some of those nuances, that their own bias can trick them, so that they know how to do this the right way. Like, that is so critical. And I think also, your lane that you love so much, tell them how to understand the data.
Yes.
Because I think so many times the recruiter's going, oh my God, I'm asking for these new metrics. And the only one I've ever really thought of as a recruiter is time to fill, or whatever it might be,
Right.
which, as we all know, time to fill is like the least appropriate thing to be
That's right.
tracking when you're trying to hire for diversity. So yeah, I think all of those things are so important. So I want you to talk, so that those are, in my opinion, some of the short-term, let's get them into place immediately. What are your thoughts on long-term kind of changes that you can do as an organization or be thinking about?
So in the long term, it goes really back to the data. We have to find out where we are, where we stand as an organization, by looking at disaggregate data, which is a funny word. We usually talk about aggregate data. It's something that a lot of people have heard of, because the internet talks about just getting all this data that we have. It's easily available. It's readily available. Aggregate data that we get from various sources. Disaggregate data breaks it down for things that aren't necessarily always matched together. For example, we want to look at, like, an aggregate data would be, how many men do we have? How many women do we have? Disaggregate data will say, how many women do we have that are executives, that are African American with a bachelor's degree? Right? How many women do we have in North Carolina that have more than 2 years of experience as a supervisor? Like, look at those types of numbers. Look at that disaggregate data. And then you have to start making those goals. That's going to be long-term goals on how you're going to get there. But then also you take that information that you have, and with people internally, show them the history of where we are. Because this is something that happens. This is inclusive AF. And it's important that everybody in the organization understands where we're coming from, right? They need to look at the whole picture and say, because as you know, when you say, we're going to add 30% more women to the team, the men cower and get upset. Or we're going to have, 10% more Black women. Then they're like, oh my God, we don't want white women. No. It's understanding, hey, historically, we've hired 2 Black people for every 100 white people, and we're going to try to make that right.
Right.
To have that's based on the population, based on our U.S. Census, based on what's going on within our neighborhoods, what's going on here, so we can try to build it to be more equitable. So those are the things that go into your long-term plan. It might be opening up a branch in a different or a base, like a call center. Maybe your call center is in, I don't know, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, because it's more diverse there than other places.
Right.
Maybe you have to, like, long-term, try to move people in various places so that you can have it that, within those parameters, and start building that plan on how you're going to support the community. And keep this open forum. I think those are the long-term goals. You do have to set some type of goals, and then you have to build the accountability into
Absolutely.
it. You have to say, what's going to happen if we don't reach those goals? And my suggestion is always, you tie it as one of the things that's attached to somebody's income, to their bonus. It's not going to be the only thing, because that's when you get messy.
Right.
We are not lawyers. None of this is legal advice. But it does get messy if you say 2 Black people or no bonus is where you get in trouble. But you can add it to say, if all of these things come into play, you've promoted people, you've invested in people, you've trained your whole team, and you were equitable with your whole team. And okay, so everything, when we're talking about inclusivity, we're talking about the normal things.
Right.
And yes, we've added to your workload. Sorry, not sorry.
No, absolutely. And so I'm going to go back to a couple of points that you made. So the aggregate versus disaggregate data. The one thing I'll say is that, and this is somewhat legal advice, and yes, I'm not an attorney, but I'm just going to tell you, that would be once you have them on your team.
That's right.
And I want to be clear about that, because this is not in the recruiting process, because we do need to keep data as aggregate data when you are sourcing them, just because you don't want to have a situation, you could have a discrimination claim if the person is not hired. So that would be one piece.
Absolutely.
And when you think about the numbers, I'm very cautious about putting a number around, we want to hire X amount of whatever.
Yes.
And the reason why is because I never want there to be a reaction of, you just hire that person because they checked a box.
You don't want the implied quota. Quotas are illegal.
Exactly. And so
I'm not a lawyer, but I know that.
Right.
Turns out.
Didn't go to law school, but here's the things I know.
have Google.
Here's some things I learned over the years. But I will say this, that is why we talk about diverse candidate slates. And that's why we talk about, when you are searching for, and this is every hiring manager, in my opinion, should say to the recruiter, I do not want to move forward in the process until I have 2 or more people that are from underrepresented groups. And that might be different depending on what your team makeup is today. It might be that, hey, you're an engineering team. So yes, it is. I want people from underrepresented groups. And that means Latinx, that means Black, that means whatever it might be. But then there also might be a marketing team that's actually, we need to add a male because we're, predominantly female, or an HR team that's predominantly female. So I think it's also looking at the way I describe it to managers is look around your table of your team, who's at the table right now and who's not.
And follow your funnel.
And
we should put that on.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Yes, for sure.
Like,
say more about what that means though, for folks that maybe don't know.
Sure. So we always talk about candidate. We know that it takes a lot of candidates and you're narrowing it down the funnel, the proverbial funnel, not a real funnel. But it makes me think of like when an actual funnel at the very beginning of the process, you're going to say everyone's a potential candidate, right? And then you have to get your requirements and the things that you're looking for, the people that are most qualified and they're available, and they start to fit into your job description. They move down the funnel. So they're prospective candidates to actual candidates, to applicants, to those that we have interviewed, second interviewed, hired, accepted, made offer, accepted offer, hired, and started. That's the funnel. We're taking them from a random name and resume on some job site all the way to the point where they are in the seat, is that
Mhm.
funnel. So we're saying follow the funnel because you really can start at the very beginning before you even, when you're starting your recruiting process, before you even have, before you've started talking to candidates, you can look through the data, and it's like census data again, by looking at how many people are represented in this job title. We have like SIC codes, and you have various codes within human resources that you can look at that will tell you, we already know in certain groups the percentage of male to female, or the percentage
Mhm.
in various ethnicities and race. We already know what the talent pool it means.
Right.
So from that aspect, how many are you capturing into your database? Are we attracting enough? You should know what that
Mhm.
percentage should be. And so you have to look at where it falls off. So if you don't have enough people applying, you need to start working there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also like I think there's this myth, or I think there's this understanding from recruiters of, I'm not going to have that data. So how do I know if my slate is actually diverse? And I think there's some tools that I think are being built right now that are super cool around this, that they can identify kind of behind the scenes when they apply, and the recruiter won't know what the things are that it'll just be, yes, your slate is diverse, or no, it's
Right.
not. And those are some of the things that I think will be really helpful for recruiters. But I want to go back to the data once you have the employees in your group. So I think the demographic data is critical. Yes, you need to know kind of where you are today, all of those things. But you talked about surveys, and I think that's another piece where you want to kind of start to dig in and cut the data in certain ways.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, look at, hey, what are your females saying about their engagement, or about the benefits, or about whatever it might be? And so making sure that you're making those cuts by managers, by sites, by all of these different
By zip
things, 'cause
code.
by zip code, you're going to see some data pop that you're going to be like, oh my God, I would never have known that this was a thing, or that this group was having this issue. And then also from the goals perspective, I am not a huge fan of saying you need to hire X amount of people and that your goals are going to be based on that. What I do like that I've seen a couple companies do is, when you are promoting people from your team, what is your promotion rate for folks that are from underrepresented groups? What are you doing to develop your folks? Are you an executive sponsor for an employee resource groups? Things like that, yes, we need to be focused on diversity. Yes, we need to be focused on inclusion, but what are other ways that you can measure that for leaders? And then, yes, absolutely, that monetary hit or gain based on their actions and their behaviors are going to determine whether you have an inclusive environment and inclusive culture. And, it's the whole concept of, you can be an amazing performer, but if you leave dead bodies on the side of the road, you shouldn't be in the organization.
She said dead bodies.
Yes, I did.
Oh, I'm a little frightened.
Watch out.
And on that note,
yeah, well, no, yeah, because it is that, like, a term, and I don't even know where this term came from, was the brilliant jerk.
yeah,
Where you have those folks on your team that are like, they can deliver, they have so much output from like a performance perspective, but then they're just not good from a culture and from a living the values
nobody's
perspective.
hanging out with them at the company picnic.
No, right. And if they are, it's because they want to like hear the horrible gossip about the other people.
Correct.
And that's also not what you want to build. So I think there's that piece also, just to, again, keep in mind, there's so much to this that, can be great. And if you're measuring the right things, I think that's the way to go. I think that's, Jackie's going to sneeze. And there you have it, folks.
Sorry.
We are really humans.
Bless me.
Bless you,
Oh,
my
thank
friend.
you.
Yes.
No, I think we've been talking about this a long time. I think where there's going to be some things across all of these that we can add into it.
Right.
Hopefully you're listening. We'll have additional resources or links or
Yes.
things that are going to be the most relevant on the site to help you move it forward. But what do you think the number one takeaway is? If they just fast forwarded all the way to past my sneeze,
Mhm.
what
What did
do
we
you
just talk
think they
about?
should do?
Um,
Yeah, start over. My name is Jackie. Oh.
The key takeaways are your name is Jackie, my name is Katie.
Yeah,
No,
yes.
I think that the key takeaway for me is the authentic communication as a leader, as an employee. Being authentic in how you show up to your employees is critical to being relatable, being respected, all of those things. So that like honest and authentic communication. And that doesn't mean, hey, you go, sorry folks, I can't find any black people, so we're just screwed. That's not authentic in my opinion. That's laziness.
Yes.
But being authentic about where you are today and being able to say, we need to do better. We need to, we need to take action here. That's one. And I think the other one is just really around, looking at the data and digging in on the data, and also like applying that to how does your data match up to your community that you're
Right.
actually trying to support. And the example that I give is always your product isn't, you're not selling a product that's for one tiny, maybe it is a very niche product that is only for like 5% of, 1% of the population, but more than likely you're trying to sell to a broader audience that looks different, that is different, that lives in different places, all of these things. And so acknowledging the fact that you actually need people that are diverse on your team to innovate and build the best product for your customers.
And I think the number one is well, those three. Okay, number 4 is make sure you're holding people accountable.
Yes.
You have to have repercussions for not meeting those goals, just like any other goal that you would have in your organization. If you don't meet it, there has to be some kind of consequences. The other piece is to plan. You have to plan, keep planning, keep iterating.
Yes.
It never ends. And I think the last thing that I hope people take away is don't be stupid. Right? Just don't
I think it's keep it simple, stupid, but I like where you're going.
I like don't be stupid. I think that's from one of my favorite YouTubers. But you have to be able to don't just run out the mouth before you say anything in those places. And and where are we going to get the money for all of this? We're going to get the money from that $36 million.
Yeah, sorry, pay cut is coming, sir. Pay cut is
coming.
coming. And here's the thing, I think I have one more takeaway.
No, your takeaway time is over.
Okay, fine. One more takeaway is if you like this episode, if you are enjoying Jackie and I's banter back and forth, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will be back.
We have to say that at the beginning. Okay, we'll redo the beginning.
No. No, please subscribe now that you realize how amazing we are, because that's what we're trying to get to.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening today. Jackie, any last words?
Don't be stupid.
Keep it simple and don't be stupid. Okay, that's not nice. We're not going to end with stupid. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Inclusive AF with Jackie Clayton and Katie Van Horn.